Puddle Lane. Poor Peter Tall. Poor Peter Tall. One Saturday morning, Tim Catchermouse started out to explore Puddle Lane. He went under the gate of the magician's garden and on down the lane. He was just going past Mr. Puffle's house when he saw the big dog lying fast asleep in the sunshine. Tim saw the big dog. There was a long ladder leaning up against Mr. Puffle's house. Mr. Puffle had been cleaning out his gutters. Tim climbed up the ladder and started to go back towards the magician's garden, jumping from roof to roof until he came to Peter Tall's house. And then there was no other roof to jump onto. Tim looked down. The wall of the magician's garden looked a long way below. Tim looked down. Tim was just going to go back to Mr. Puffle's ladder when Mr. Puffle came out of his door, picked up his ladder, and took it away down the lane. Tim looked all around. He couldn't see any way down. "Meow," cried Tim. "Meow." He mewed as loudly as he could, hoping the magician would hear him. "Meow," cried Tim. The magician was out, but Peter Tall heard Tim mew. He opened his front door and looked out. He couldn't see anyone, so he stepped out into Puddle Lane. "Meow," cried Tim, looking down over the edge of the roof. Peter Tall opened his door. Peter Tall looked up and saw Tim. "Poor little cat," he said. "I must get you down." Peter Tall was a kind man, but he wasn't very good at doing things. That wouldn't have mattered if he had let other people help him. But he wouldn't. He wanted to do everything himself. And Peter Tall had had a bad week. Peter Tall looked up and saw Tim. On Monday, he had found a crack in a pane of glass in one of his top windows. Mr. Puffle had offered to mend it for him, but Peter Tall wanted to mend it himself. Monday. He had got out his ladder and put in a new pane, but as he climbed down the ladder, he slipped and his foot hit the middle window. The glass broke. Peter hadn't any more glass to mend that window, so he had to cover the hole with a piece of cardboard. Peter's foot hit the window. On Tuesday, Peter had baked an apple pie. He took it next door to give it to old Mrs. Winter. Old Mrs. Winter had a very bad cold and couldn't go out shopping. Peter Tall really was a very kind man. Tuesday. But as old Mrs. Winter opened her door, Peter Tall slipped on the steps and tossed the apple pie into the house right over her head. So poor Mrs. Winter had no apple pie. She had to clean it all up off her best carpet. Old Mrs. Winter opened the door. On Wednesday, Peter Tall had seen Mr. Puffle's ladder leaning up against Mr. Puffle's house. Peter Tall thought that Mr. Puffle must have forgotten to put the ladder away, so he took it round to Mr. Puffle's back garden and left it lying there. Wednesday. But Mr. Puffle was up on the roof of his house fixing a chimney which was loose, and when he wanted to climb down again, the ladder had gone. Mr. Puffle was very cross. It was a long time before Peter Tall heard his shouts for help. and brought the ladder back for him. Mr. Puffle was up on the roof. On Thursday, Peter Tor had gone to see old Mr. Gotobed. Mr. Gotobed had a bad cold too. Mr. Gotobed stayed in bed, and Peter went in to make him a cup of tea. But he forgot to fill the kettle before he put it on the fire, and he burnt a big hole in it. Mr. Gotobed sighed a deep sigh, and said that he would make his tea himself next time. Thursday. On Friday, Peter had gone to the market. It was a very wet day, and Puddle Lane was full of puddles. As he was coming home with a basket full of cheese and cakes, Peter slipped on a wet stone and sat down right in the middle of a very big puddle. The cheese and cakes fell out of the basket all over the lane, and the wide-awake mice spent a very busy night, taking all the bits of cheese and cake back to their home in the hollow tree. Friday. And now it was Saturday morning, and Tim Catchermouse was up on Peter Tor's roof. As Peter came back with his ladder, Sarah and Davy came out of their front door into Puddle Lane. "What are you doing?" asked Sarah. "I'm going to rescue that poor little cat," said Peter Tor. He put the ladder against the roof. "Is that ladder safe?" asked Sarah. "It looks a bit rickety." "Of course it's safe," said Peter Tor. Saturday. He was halfway up when the ladder broke. Peter Tor fell down into Puddle Lane with a great crash, and the broken ladder fell on top of him. Peter Tor fell down into Puddle Lane. Sarah and Davy ran to help him. Mr. Gotobed heard the crash and ran out of his house. Poor Peter Tor was covered in bruises, but he wasn't badly hurt. Sarah and Davy helped him to get to his feet. "You need to sit down and have a cup of tea," said old Mr. Gotobed. "Come over to my house and I'll put the saucepan on to boil." Mr. Gotobed ran out of his house. Sarah and Davy helped Peter Tor to limp across the lane to Mr. Gotobed's house. Then they went back to clear up the broken bits of ladder. Davy had just picked up a long bit when they heard a mew. They looked up and saw Tim Catchermouse looking down over the edge of the roof. Sarah and Davy looked up. They saw Tim Catchermouse. "I know what we can do," said Davy. "Give me a hand with this." Sarah and Davy took the long piece of ladder over to their own house and set it up against the top windowsill. "Let's go inside and watch," said Davy. If we keep very quiet, the little cat won't be frightened." Sarah and Davy set up the ladder. Tim Catchermouse looked down into Puddle Lane. There was no one there. He saw the broken piece of ladder. He jumped down onto old Mrs. Winter's roof and then onto Sarah and Davy's house. He ran down the roof and climbed down the broken ladder. He ran safely back to the magician's garden and told Pegs all about his adventures. Tim and Pegs. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday,